So it is lesson 19. Welcome back, social 10. And within lesson 19 yesterday, we began by looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we looked at the concept of trying to evaluate globalization by evaluating to what extent does the economy provide for our needs. Today we're going to discuss the concept of disparity. So if you only have one note at the end of this concept, at this end of this, that's ambitious. You have a whole page you're going to write notes on. If you only have one note for disparity, it means inequality. That's all it means, inequality. Have and have not, rich and poor, disparity. That's all it means. So my social 30s were here today, and we're building for their final multiple choice exams. And multiple choice really is just a test of language. And underneath that umbrella, we need you to create a glossary of key terms. So beginning in Social 20, if you haven't done it this year, you'll want to keep a glossary of key terms. And one of the key terms here is disparity. Disparity is inequality. Economically, we talk about have and have not, rich and poor. Often disparity is created by an unequal distribution of natural resources. So at one time in Canada's history, we had have provinces, rich provinces, and poor provinces based upon the unequal distribution of a valuable natural resource called oil. So we had rich have provinces that have oil, like Alberta, and we had poor provinces that had not oil, like, say, Prince Edward Island. So disparity can be caused by an unequal distribution of things of value, like oil or natural gas, or maybe in the future, unequal distribution of clean water, based upon yesterday's lesson. So all disparity means is inequality. Yesterday, we ended the lesson by looking at a cartoon that illustrated disparity. Have and have not, rich and poor. That yesterday we also looked at some sources that look at places like China as they've combated disparity. One visual representation of disparity can be extreme poverty. So it appears that China has been combating disparity since the Deng Xiaoping capitalist embracing. Now, even within a first world country like Canada, we may have disparity. So some related concepts that we've heard of, maybe, is the 1% against the 99%. The 1% against the 99. This idea that, Canada, the United States, we're not places where there's equal power, that there's an elite, a 1%, that they wield more economic power, and because of that, they wield more political and social power. Disparity, haves and have-nots. So, to simplify things, we can think of some of the richest people on the planet. You can think of the CEO and founder of Amazon. You can think of the CEO and founder of SpaceX. The richest people on the planet, right?
Elon Musk. He's the richest. Yeah, Elon Musk is the richest person in the world.
Yeah, because his stock went up this last week. It was just this past week that Elon Musk became the richest person on the planet. So Elon Musk is worth almost $200 billion. And Jeff Bezos is worth $184 billion. Bill Gates is worth 132, and the reason why he's only worth 132 is he's given away already tens of billions of dollars to different charities. So in terms of economic power, we have and we have not. There's a disparity between them and us. That's disparity, inequality. And let's say that Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, they have an idea that they'd like to talk to President Joe Biden about after he becomes president. And let's say Russ McBride has an idea that he'd like to talk to Joe Biden after he becomes president about. Who's Joe Biden going to say, yeah, come on down to the Oval Office, let's talk? Russ McBride or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos? He's going to listen to these guys. With economic power comes political influence. That's disparity as well. Or let's say that we're at West Edmonton Mall, and there's Elon Musk, there's Jeff Bezos, there's Connor McDavid, there's some Hollywood stars, and there's Russ McBride walking around. Who do you think people are like, oh man, fascinated to see? And they're like, hey, should I talk to them? Who do they want to spend time with? Let's say that these individuals are at a social gathering. You walk into a social gathering, obviously this is in the future when social gatherings are legal. You walk into a social gathering and there's Jeff Bezos, there's Elon Musk, there's all of these famous people that you're aware of, and there's Russ McBride. Who are you gonna go and hey, how are you doing? You know, that you wanna go listen to their stories. You know, it's not Russ McBride. You've had enough of his stories. You want to go and listen to Elon Musk has just returned from Mars in this possible future scenario, right? You're like, dude, what was that like? It's not like, wow, McBride was still bald, eh? How's that? Like, that's a pretty short conversation. So not only does Elon Musk have more economic power, more political influence, but there's a social stigma around these elite that we idolize them, that we begin to see them as godlike for some. So what is disparity? It's inequality. And because of inequality, some people may have political and social opportunities, others don't, is a key concept. We have the 1% and we have the 99%. And the 1% and the 99% is some language, and we're not talking about 1%er bikers who are gang members, although that came up. I did put an R at the end. The 1% and 99% come from the magazine Adbusters. What? 1%? Oh, that's amazing. Did some math for me. So 1% and 99% came from a magazine called Adbusters, and they created a movement called the Occupy movement. And what they were trying to present, their narrative, their story that they're trying to present is that we are the 99%. We are the majority, right? 99%, that's almost 100%. We are the majority. Why do the members of the 1% have so much more opportunity and power than we do? Why does the 1% have more power than the 99%? It doesn't seem equitable. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem rational to allow a few individuals to shape government policy and to shape social platforms more than the rest of us. So there's this group of protesters called the Occupy movement, and they began to occupy public spaces like Wall Street, and they called themselves the 99%, the voice of the masses, and their target was the 1%. These extremely wealthy and powerful people that had too much influence. And the whole point of this 1% movement, the whole reason for it is disparity. So there was a financial meltdown in 2008. And after the financial meltdown in 2008, the governments of the United States came to the aid of corporations, and they gave them bailouts of hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure that these big banks and big companies didn't fail. But they didn't bail out the average American families that were losing their homes. So it looked like the government was coming to the aid of the 1%, the corporate leaders, and not the 99%. You know, where's the bailout for Main Street? You're giving a bailout for Wall Street, but not for Main Street. So there's a lot of protests that were trying to get the attention of government to say that the government owes a responsibility to we the people. And if the government is only upholding the wishes of the 1%, maybe we don't have a democracy ruled by the people. Maybe we have an oligarchy or a plutocracy ruled by the rich, ruled by the few. So one of the challenges with disparity is that because of disparity, because of an unequal distribution of wealth, we also have an unequal distribution of political opportunity and power. And this is a threat to democracy. That lobby groups have an undue influence on government policy because they have the money to say, hey, I'm Jeff Bezos, Mr. President, can I come talk to you? And Mr. President says, yeah, you're worth almost $200 billion. I've got time to listen to Jeff Bezos. So they have opportunities that the rest of us do not. And that would be a corrupting influence over democracy. So that's connected to the concept of disparity. You're going to see that return back in Social 30 when we talk about lobby groups and governments. But even here in Canada, in 2009, the richest 20% of Canadians earned on average $117,500 more than the poorest 20%. The average income of the wealthiest families with children was $225,436 higher than the average income of the poorest families with children. Now, I don't want you to memorize numbers. You know, if we're writing an essay and you need to put numbers in, you could always come back and get this, or you could Google more current numbers. But what I want you to do is recognize the concept. Disparity means inequality. One way to measure it is economic. Another way to measure it is access to influence your political system. And a third way to measure it is socially, how much power or influence do you have on fads and things like that, on social values. Any confusion about the concept of disparity? Now we could see it here in Wetaskiwin. We have some houses in Wetaskiwin and Wetaskiwin County that are worth millions of dollars. You know, I was driving around a little bit lost the other day looking at some acreages, and some of the acreages are amazing. You know, people have barns that are amazing. Some barns are worth millions of dollars, it seems like. There's beautiful barns out there. And then we do have homeless people in our city, people that don't have any shelter. So you can even trace this all the way back to yesterday's lesson on Maslow, and you can go down to that first tier, which is physiological needs, and disparity can be measured by looking at to what extent do we have water, food, and shelter. Disparity, that's the first word today. Here we see a chart that shows economic trends from 1989 to 2009, and you can see how there's a fair level progression down here with the lowest income. Average income is here, and this is the highest income. So the highest income went from 185,806 to 246,279, fairly significant growth. The lowest income went from 17,900 to 28. Now what we're seeing here in this chart is that the economy has benefited the highest income earners disproportionately more than the lowest income earners. So who does, in this case, Canada work for? Canada from 89 to 2009 was working more for the richest Canadians than it was for the poorest Canadians. Poorest Canadians, and this is not inflation adjusted. So if you adjust it for inflation, then people are probably actually, in terms of real numbers, they're making less because prices have gone up. So what we've seen is that in those 20 years, Canada was really rewarding our top income earners. So the economy, the politics, the policies were put in place to promote these, perhaps at the expense of these. Another way to see disparity globally is to look at the digital divide. So have and have not technology. Another way to measure disparity is who has and has not technology. So this is where I take out my iPhone 5 and people are like, dude, is that even an iPhone? It's tiny, right? Somebody's got like an iPhone 12 or something that's like twice the size of mine. Like, hey, look at this. I can, start my car from here and stuff like that. I have only limited room for apps on mine. Yours has like multiple cameras, I think. Like, look at that. That's disparity. That's technological disparity. There is a digital divide, though, that is somewhat represented on this map. And what we're seeing is that there's parts of the world that at night are quite lit up and parts that are quite dark because of a lack of electricity, a lack of modernity, a lack of civilization. Yes, sir?
Isn't a lot of part of Africa there is desert though?
Some of it is desert for sure, yep. Yep, lots of deserts along here that would definitely take that in consideration. But not all of this is desert down here. So Sahara Desert is definitely here, and that would be a lot of wide start. If we're looking at, Canada, the Northwest Territories would probably look pretty dark too, right? Digital divide is also who has access to the internet. So we just had 5 weeks of online learning. Not everyone has the same technology at home. You know, we're watching each other in the cameras. Some people have like, you know, their own headsets and like speakers and podiums. They're set up to be like a, whatever the term is, like vlogger or blogger or whatever. Like they are an online personality, and others are like, dude, I have nothing. Honestly, I have a Chromebook from school at home because my at-home computer broke. I didn't replace it. So when I'm at home, one of the reasons that I did the online portion of this class from school is, you know, this is all I would have had at home is a Chromebook, and the video I would have been presenting to you would have been limited because of that. That's digital divide. There's a digital divide. At an extreme level, there's one side of it where people don't even have access to the internet. You know, in 2021, that's a difficult thing to envision. But there's also a digital divide that also just includes what type of technology do you have? And I think that's a pretty easy thing to envision. One final way to measure disparity, as we wrap this part up, would be caloric intake and diet. You know, what are you able to eat on a daily basis? That the average North American, and by North American I'm just saying Canada and the United States, sorry Mexico here, but the average Canadian and American, our caloric intake is getting closer and closer to 4,000 calories a day. Whereas there's places in the world where the average person is existing on half of that caloric intake. And it might not be just an absolute number either. So maybe Canadians have access to more calories a day than people living in Bangladesh or living in Nepal. But at the same time, it's what type of calories do we have access to? Our diets are very varied, right? We have diets that are rich, whereas there's places in the world where the diets are quite simple, quite basic. So another way to measure disparity is looking at your diet, looking at your caloric intake and looking at your variety. So we have one word, disparity, right? And we defined it, it's inequality. It can be measured economically, politically, socially. Economically, we talk about the 1% and the 99%. Economically, we got Jeff Bezos, we have Elon Musk, we have people like Warren Buffett. Politically, we have the idea that, you know, governments listen to some more than others. That can lead to an oligarchy, a plutocracy. Socially, there's a lot more opportunity for celebrities to influence the social agenda. That's why they call themselves social influencers, right? That if I'm trying to create a fad, like if I'm like, oh no, you know what, let's be the red toque people, right? Red toques are cool. And red toque, by wearing a red toque, it's some kind of protest, right? It's Red Toque Day. And guess what? Maybe one other student starts wearing red toques, and you guys make fun of that kid. You know, like you just carve him or her up. You're like, dude, you're actually wearing a red toque. You bought into that? If I have 3 students that are following me, it'd be creepy, right? It'd be like, you know, my little posse or something. But at the same time, it is not going global. But there are social influencers that can change things globally, like hashtag Black Lives Matter and other things like that. So another measurement of disparity is social influence. We can measure disparity by looking at the digital divide. We can measure disparity by looking at caloric intake and the type of calories we have. We can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and say, physiologically, who has clean water, who doesn't? Who has shelter, who doesn't? This is an easy concept. Any questions about disparity? Okay, I'm going to press end. That's the video on disparity.